and they were planning a fireworks only show, and they can show us that, hey, we've reached out to fireworks contractors and this is kind of what we'd had in place. And so if we go this other direction, then maybe we would reduce that amount of fireworks by some amount or all. So we didn't close the door on new shows.
Okay. And where is this additional funding coming from?
It's coming from the district's community incentives pot, which is locally generated funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you very much. Member Robinson.
First of all, I love the alternative. I've seen a drone display before, and they're quite entertaining. A couple things. Do we anticipate this program also going next year? So, for example, if we go back to our communities and we have some interest, is there a sign-up sheet or something that we can?
Yeah, I think that question is still unanswered. You know, I think that as a pilot, and we do a lot of pilots here, as you heard earlier, you know, we started off the air purifier program and it kind of took off with some, and by the way, the funding for the air purifier program has all been this board and, you know, the staff going out and actually reaching out and bringing other dollars in to be able to fund those programs. This particular program, I think, based on the experience of the program, how it goes, collecting that data, and then kind of seeing, okay, where do we go from here? I think it's something that the board, you know, is going to receive an update from us on, and then kind of decide, you know, where do we want to see this go? Like, did we make enough headway? Did we have enough alternatives to fireworks, or I was about to say fireworks, but alternatives to fireworks during the first round to have enough interest out there for people who just want to do this on their own, or do we want to do another round, you know, based on a lot of folks that, you know, really have that interest but don't have, say, the means to, say, pay for that extra cost, you know, for the drone show. So I don't think we're you know, I don't have a recommendation for you on that yet today. I think it's still to be seen with how this particular program goes. Now, we'd love to see if there's interest from others out there for sure. I think maybe that's something that we can work on to see if there's, you know, we'd be happy to commit to, you know, maybe having a list or something like that where we see that interest kind of on an ongoing basis. But it's going to be up to this board, you know, I think, as we talk about future budgets and how this program goes, informed by that, as to whether or not we want to continue funding something like this.
A couple other questions. One question is, I know we went over this in study session, I've forgotten. Can you remind me again the chemicals that this will help us mitigate?
There's a slew of them. So one that pops pretty frequently for us on the federal air quality standard realm of things is PM 2.5. So there's a lot of PM 2.5 that we'll see on the 4th of July or at the end of the year, around, you know, New Year's, those types of celebrations. But within that PM 2.5, there's actually a lot of different metals and elements and just a long list of various toxic compounds that are emitted. Which I'm happy to provide to you, and I'll give you a whole list of them. But basically, it's a lot of different compounds.
And then lastly, because this primarily focuses on larger groups, you haven't received much pushback, have you, from the smaller groups? Because a lot of them use the fireworks as a fundraising device, but this seems like it doesn't touch them much. Is that accurate?
That's correct. These are generally organizations that are putting on a larger scale event. Although I think we have a great mix of large and small entities that have applied for the program. Some very modest requests, you know, $2,500 for a small drone show at a high school graduation, for instance, all the way up to, you know, a large scale, you know, 4th of July type of event. So I think I was really pleased with sort of the variety of applications that we received and the sort of the range of their ask. It wasn't everybody wasn't asking for the maximum amount. I think we got a really good mix of large and small organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. You know, this is a great project when we think about the expectations of the community of what these celebrations are supposed to look like and what they've experienced in the past. When we think about the adverse health consequences that the last question touched on, you know, it's this predictable deterioration, collapse of air quality in the 24 to 48 hours after, and a reminder that the kind of pollution we're talking about is especially health damaging because of its inflammatory effects when it gets into our lungs and into our bloodstream. And inflammation equates with heart disease and asthma and lung disease. And anyway, so, you know, and it's the air quality issues. As we learned in November, I think we all gained a greater appreciation for the accidents related to fireworks, for the fires related to fireworks, that there are a lot of negative consequences for communities, as well as the positive things that come from these events. So it's really wonderful to see the breadth of interest that this has garnered in terms of big communities, small communities, rural, very urban, different kinds of sites in terms of schools and so on. I guess my question, because this really speaks to the most difficult, well, we're trying to change behavior. We would like there to be no fireworks from a health standpoint. And changing behavior is the most difficult thing to do in public health that there is to do. It's the most important. So why are they interested in doing this? Is it just the novelty? And that's not going to be a long-term driver, but I'm interested in why they're interested. And also, you know, I think we're very interested in getting value for the investment. This is a real sum of money that we're putting into this. And so I'm wondering about the data collection that we'll get as to what kind of impact, how many people are involved, what's the response of people to this kind of event as opposed to another, and is this really going to be a successful model? Is this going to help drive a successful model? And I appreciate our chair's comments about, well, this builds capacity for drones as opposed to fireworks. So these are very important things long term in terms of how we leverage this. And one thing that I thought about, well, what is the cost of a fireworks show compared to a drone show? How different are they? And obviously, as capacity is built, that'll be a very different driver too.
You're 100% correct. Right now, the way the market is, in general, fireworks shows are less expensive. And sort of that's why we're proposing these investments into these alternatives. But I think you're 100% right, and this gets to Chair Chies's point about capacity building. I think the more of those contractors that you see in the marketplace, those costs will start to come down as more people accept these, as they're more broadly available. I think the competitiveness of the market will bring those costs down to where they're likely competitive with a similarly sized fireworks show.
And I think just to add a little bit on the other part of your question around, accountability and gathering information, that's useful and verifying the feasibility, the long-term effectiveness of the alternatives. I think it is something that we intend on doing with these projects, collecting data on, say, attendance at these events, and hopefully being able to show that that by having successful events in these communities, that the residents are interested in those. Perhaps if it's like a 4th of July kind of a thing, perhaps they're not lighting off fireworks as much in the residential sector by having, say, strong attendance at an Independence Day celebration, which is one of the other benefits. Why one of the whys as to what the value of the program. So we are looking to collect some data along those lines as part of the project. So if there's any ideas on that, there's a balance there in terms of how much data and basically make sure it's reasonable with the partners that you're working with on this. But I think there's an expectation that as a pilot, it's not just funding the project, but also trying to learn about the event and the motivations as much as we can. I don't know if you can necessarily land the exact motivation for why they're trying this out. I would guess it's probably going to be a mixed response. But if we can learn more of that, I think it'll be useful to hopefully have this become more of a viable option down the road. So we're certainly interested in that as part of this project. And
again, reflecting back to the study session, because I really hadn't appreciated until then, the presentations from the first responders and the fire department. They're important people to involve in this data collection loop, is to be sure they're aware that there's this change, and we're interested in their impressions of how this works out.
Thank you very much. Member Rickman.
Thank you, Chairman. With the additional funding, will the application process be reopened, or are we filing or filling previous filed apps to be processed?
We would be filling all of the available applications that we received, all of the eligible applications that we received during the open solicitation period. So we're not proposing to reopen it.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Vice Chair Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of my questions is real simple. A drone to me is something that kind of flies above the air and looks at stuff, but what's the difference between the drone and the laser, and how does it interact as far as the show is concerned?
So drone shows typically are a fleet of drones, hundreds up to thousands of drones that are controlled by a singular computer, and then they create these sort of spectacular images in the sky. And so every one of them has lights on it, and they're choreographed so that they make these great presentations in the sky. Laser light shows are different. They're generally projected at something, a background, and they're more localized. They're ground-based lasers. They're a similar result in that it's just a visual visual appearance of something interesting. But lasers they're ground-based, whereas the drones are up in the air and they're all choreographed together.
So the pictures that we have in the example is mostly a drone.
Correct.
Drone.
And consequent, all of the applications that we received were for drone shows. We didn't receive any for laser shows.
Okay. And the other thing that I'd like to just touch on is one of our board members mentioned police and fire and working with them. It might be a good opportunity for our department and this board to think about trying to engage them to see if maybe cities might be interested in making an ordinance change in regards to the fireworks that are pyrotechnical kind of thing, in order to reduce that PM2 and the other things that are being put out there in the atmosphere. And again, carbs, because this is a real important thing to me, not just for health's sake, but for the other damages that it does to people's lives, possibly losing their homes and causing people to become homeless. We have that in our community where people's houses, the roofs have caught on fire and now they can't live in their home anymore. So, this one kind of touches me closely to see if we can do something in a quick, fast, hurry way to help our cities look at changing how they want to do these shows in our community. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Member McCauley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And member Lewis, we did a couple laser shows up in Bass Lake, and they were not very well received. But I think the drone thing is a much better idea, and people will be a little bit more excited about it. Still, I am a little skeptical about whether or not organizations will continue with this long term. Understanding the cost differential and people's preference for fireworks, and so just looking at alternative uses for what these funds could be used, things like the clean air rooms that we were just talking about, or the Drive Clean program, would really just like to see, some follow-up data. I think as Dr. Sheriff's expressed around this, I think the real change would come with local jurisdictions making, ordinance changes, as Member Lewis suggested. But I think, if we had put some kind of commitment around not using fireworks on these organizations, my guess is they wouldn't participate. And I think that just kind of speaks to, why they're doing this is because there's money involved, right? So a little skeptical and sorry for not being quite as rosy as the rest of the board or as tactful as member Sheriffs for Dr. Sheriffs, but just wanted to make those comments and ensure that we are taking as much diligence as we can to measure the success of this program as it is a test program. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Preciado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For me, I was the one that took this initiative to my city after the November study session. And I believe it's important as leaders get involved in reducing pollution. So he was very, very supportive, and he actually reached out to the Rotary Club to apply. And I believe this is something that we need to because it is expensive. 25 agencies that apply at a cost of $845,000. And in order to make it continuously, we do need to continue reducing pollution in any which way we can. But I think a pilot program shows that it can be done. And hopefully as technology progresses, communities or counties will be able to provide that service or help provide it at a cheaper price. And I really get shocked every 4th of July when I drive through town. So much smoke pollution is incredible, and that's something that really needs to go away. We're really trying to reduce pollution, how we've been doing, but I think we do need the support of communities, counties, and also I really thank the board for having the presentation and finding solutions for that kind of shows. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Scutia Brayton.
Thank you, Chair. And this is a question for Mr. DeYoung. So if the allocation is approved today, and since this program is working on a reimbursement basis, and July is just a few months away, is it our intent that the applicant would be reimbursed for this period or next year?
No, our goal and our intent would be to provide agreements in advance of these shows for this year. We've got an agreement ready to go. And once we've finalized all the applications, our intent is to get the agreements in place prior to this year, starting actually in April, and then they would be reimbursed for this year's events that they've applied for.
That's wonderful. I personally plan on attending one or both of the drone events in my region. I think it would be lovely if other board members could perhaps attend their regional drone events, just so that we could be better informed and walk away with that experience and bring that back to an evaluation of this program and see if this is indeed something would be of value to do again next year or not. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Member Reina.
Thank you, Chair. I'm seeing this chart which lists the applications, and I see no applications from Kern County, and which is disappointing. And I wanted to ask, I know that staff reached out through different methods, but can we improve outreach to perhaps get a better participation from all counties? And also, I wanted to ask regarding this program, which is a pilot program. Many communities in Kern County have fireworks shows. I think it's a very important part of the 4th of July celebration. And I think that the focus of this program is to reduce pollution around the 4th of July. And I think this is going to make a big impact, as Mayor Preciado was just talking about how he sees around his city all the pollution. And I do the same thing. But I think if we continue this program, my question is, are we going to continue to fund the same organizations that have applied in the previous year, or are we going to open it, if there is an interest, to other organizations, or will we be able to fill the funding or find the funding to fund all of the people that apply? I know that's a mouthful, but maybe you can answer those questions for me.
Yeah, I'll take a first shot, and Todd, feel free to add to it to the chair. No, first of all, in the outreach, that's always something that we're looking at. Doing better with all of our programs. I think if there's any ideas there, and And if, you're all representatives to your communities. And so as was discussed earlier, if you have any outlets that, we could be using for that outreach, we're always exploring those. I definitely appreciate, that comment. And then on your second question, I think you raised some good questions that the board is going to need to deliberate, in the event that we do want to continue pursuing this, in terms of how much funding, we want to provide. Perhaps there's a lot of decision making that happens, once you do a pilot like this, and we've done this over and over and over again with other successful programs that we have. When we learn more about the cost, interest, motivations, you can always design programs that don't necessarily put as much money, say, into the event, also to stretch the dollars further. That's another possibility as you think about this down the road. The question that you raised about who's eligible, if somebody already participated versus somebody who hasn't, I think that's a big decision that the board would have to make as well. And then the funding source, and amounts, right? How much money out of, as Dr. Sherris pointed out, there's a lot of different things, and Supervisor McCauley, we could be funding different things. So how much money do we want to put into this? Or do we partner? Say, do the counties want to perhaps create county level incentive programs? Is it necessarily even only an air district board, or the cities as well? You may want to consider doing that. So given that a lot of this is community, centered and supported, by the various agencies here. So there's a lot of questions that come up as we think about this, and we'll certainly be putting thought into it. I'm sure the board's going to have a good discussion about this as well, as to, what do we learn coming out of this? How do we keep supporting this effort?
Thank you, Samir. And this program is doing something. It is focusing attention into an existing problem and trying to find a solution to it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the insurance crisis in California, I would think that the insurance companies would be an ally in this process. Also, and this is just a broader question here, just because it's a balancing act. I don't even know if this is possible, but are there some fireworks that emit more or less of the, say, the PM 2.5? Because at some point, it seems like if we could look to that as part of the balancing act, the fireworks that maybe don't express as much, look to those or encourage that in the manufacturing process. Just a thought.
Yeah. Thank you very much. All right, I see no more comments, so we're going to go out to the public.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Bakersfield that would like to comment on this item?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Modesto to comment on this item?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? I do have one coming to the podium.
Chairman, board, some of you think, what is he doing talking about this? My God, or my gosh. We also need to worry about the dogs. This way our dogs will be home, correct? Number two, I think Syed, Samir, and Todd, and board, it's a great opportunity to advertise your business at night. I can see the Unified Air Pollution Control District on one of these presentations. I could see the businesses that derive income, the Girls and Boys Club, whatever, Marjorie Mason, all of these people use the 4th and various things to raise money for their community nonprofits. So I can see a light show that says, brought to you tonight by, I don't know, Pepsi Cola. I guess that's a safe one to use without getting into trouble and advertising anybody. But I think there's some great opportunities. I've seen one of these shows, and they're the part that is all these little drones, Todd. Man, if you don't hit the right lever, we have a disaster. We have the crash in the air. I mean, it's ungodly. I don't know how. But I think it's a great opportunity. But I think I know last year when they went off, my neighbors had 2 dogs and they literally jumped the fence. And so in that part of it, it's not huge, but it's important. because those animals are somewhere now. Where are they at? But I think the advertisement, incentive funding, like our tractor program, is a great opportunity. You want to get some help from the district. You also have an opportunity to advertise. And advertising at night has not, the only thing you see is on the freeway, on those big billboards, if they're on, if they have lights. So I think it's a great opportunity again. I agree. It's another piece of that 2.5 we're going after, but we want to do it safely and correctly. And if there's a real reduction, and I believe there is because of that amount of time. So again, Mr. Chair, I would just make sure we mention dogs in the program and making sure their welfare is there as well, and advertisement. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public in Fresno? I do have one online comment, Thomas Menz.
Welcome back, Thomas.
Yes, I suspect Supervisor Robinson that it's the ground level residential fireworks that are the safe and sane that are producing more of the PM2.5 problem. I don't know, but I do hope this takes off. The drones provide such a huge spectacle that it becomes more popular than the fireworks, but I'm skeptical. But you know, 4th of July and New Year's are certainly filter-worthy days. On the previous item, I'd attempt to raise my hand and somehow it didn't register. Supervisor McCauley, I didn't mean to misrepresent the emissions inventory. I attended a couple workshops, and my understanding was that managed burning, which would include both ag and controlled burns, amounted to 6 tons per day, that residential was 3 tons per day, and there's a third category, fires, that's 0.2 tons per day, which I took to be wildfire, and staff didn't contradict me when I suggested that was the case, but maybe I have that wrong. I don't want to give short shrift to short-term exposure, high levels of PM2.5, which I guess worldwide, according to a Lancet study I was looking at yesterday, amount to about 1 million deaths per year. 49,000 of those are in the United States in 2019, last year, for which we have data on that. I think that the filtration program is very important. I spend, I think, $400 a year for twice a year for 2 MERV 16 filters for my house to clean the entire house. And then if need be, when it's really extreme, wildfire event, or when the wood smoke in the winter is really bad, I've got room-sized HEPA filters, which cost $100 to re-outfit. So that $35 to $40 cost of replacement filters on the units you're providing seems really good. I know you also have the box fan with the MERV 14 filters, which you have on your site and have cited before, and those are really effective. But maybe somebody could clarify on the emissions inventory, whether I have that right about what is listed as fires, and I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
There's no further online comments.
Okay, could someone clarify for Thomas?
Mr. Chair, and just a quick clarification, then we're happy to circle back with Mr. Menz. But yeah, that fire category is structural fires in the inventory, and we'll go back and circle to go over that with him some more.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just always like to try and wrap up what I thought I heard, but and have some comments. I think this is fluid. I think everyone is okay going forward because we're trying to change behavior. And this district has had a long history of incentivizing the change of behavior rather than mandating it without any funds. And I think that's what we're trying to do. Hopefully we can build some capacity. I will tell you on a go forward basis, it's all up to this board how we see this as successful or not successful. And for me, it's going to be based on those outcomes, either how many people see the shows, if we see lower or better air quality, because at some point this might not be viable, but it may be wildly successful too. So I'm not going to make any judgment today. I'm glad we're trying something. We're trying to deal with an issue that we have. And so I think it's very positive. And with that, I will entertain, if there's no other comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion.
Second.
Do we have a second? Okay, we have a second. Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Couch,
Yes.
Ms. Escutia Brayton. Okay. Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pereira,
Aye.
Mr. Preciado,
Yes.
Mr. Reyna,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson, Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian,
Aye.
Ms. Nguyen,
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa.
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Thank you very much. On to item 9, and thank you very much, Todd. Adopt a proposed amendment to Rule 4905, natural gas-fired fan type central furnaces. And Jonathan and Samir, I think.
All right, thank you, Chair. Members of the board, I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning. I'll provide this overview this morning. So a bit of background here on Rule 4905. This was first adopted back in 2005 as a point of sale rule that limits NOx emissions from natural gas-fired furnaces. And this applied to furnaces with a heat input less than 150,000 British thermal units per hour, or a combined heating cooling furnace less than 65,000 BTU per hour. This really was applicable to residential uses or commercial buildings for space heating. So if you can keep that in your mind, that's what we're talking about with this rule. About 10 years later, this rule was amended in 2015 to establish a low NOx limit of 14 nanograms of NOx per joule of heat. And when this was first established, there was some concern by manufacturers to be able to design the technology to meet that fuel efficiency standard of that NOx limit there. And because of that concern, a 3-year timeline was set up where manufacturers could still manufacture and sell a non-compliant unit, but in exchange, they had to pay an emissions fee on top of selling that unit. The reason for that was a desire to create a fair marketplace between a manufacturer who can design a compliant unit with that NOx limit. It could be a more expensive furnace to sell, and then a non-compliant unit may be less expensive, but that emissions fee then brought the cost of the two more equal together. So we have a fair market while the technology continues to be developed for these different types of furnaces. So through this process over the years, manufacturers have been successful in developing units that meet this 14 nanogram per joule NOx limit over time, except for one category that still remains, and that's for manufactured home furnaces or a mobile home, is what we're talking about. Manufactured homes represent about 1% of the total units sold in the valley. So this is just a very small percentage of what's left over that needs to be developed. And some of the challenges that are being faced with developing a technology that meets this low NOx limit, the design of furnaces for a mobile home are very different from what we see in a larger home or commercial setting. Currently, there are only 2 manufacturers in the valley that develop and sell these types of units, so there aren't a lot that do this. It's a more specialized type of device. It uses a sealed combustion process where it's drawing air from the outside into the furnace for combustion. There's a more limited space in this type of a setting, smaller ducts in mobile homes, air pressure concerns in different ways. So because of this, the design of a unit like this that can meet the low NOx standard is more difficult and it's taking more time. In addition to that, manufacturers of these units are also placing a priority on developing zero emission technologies as well, seeing where things are going with the state of California for zero emission technology. They're placing a lot of focus there in recent years and less focus on low NOx technologies. In addition, these units are also subject to a number of other requirements from the U.S. Department of Housing, U.S. Department of Energy, just another layer of complexity that these manufacturers have to comply with. So the reason that we are looking at amending this rule, what we're proposing today, is because the emissions fee date that I was mentioning before, that has passed just this last September. So you can see the list of types of units in this table here. Those fee end dates have already passed for condensing and non-condensing units, weatherized units. There now is low NOx technologies in place for those types of units, but manufactured homes is the last one. So the fee deadline was September of last year, but there is a 6-month sell-through period. So any type of furnaces that were built up to that point could be sold through 6 months after that. So that goes until the end of March of this year, just next week. In addition, the South Coast Air Quality Management District also recently amended their analogous rule for these same types of units for the same category here that we're talking about, manufactured homes, to push that date 2 more years out to the end of September 2025. So with all of that in mind, what we're proposing here is to also extend the date for manufactured home furnaces out 2 years, so to September 30th, 2025. This will allow the continued sale of furnaces into the small manufactured home marketplace for mobile homes, ensuring the availability of these furnaces to Valley residents for these types of homes. And this also provides for regulatory consistency between what we're doing here and what South Coast is doing, which makes it more clear for manufacturers to have similar requirements in different parts of the state, so they can continue to develop these technologies. We also added a little bit of clarity in the rule as well for reporting of units that were sold through that 6-month sell-through period, when they're supposed to provide their reporting and that emissions fee. So we added that clarity as well. We went through a public process for this rule amendment. We held a workshop a few weeks ago on February 13th. Materials were provided in English and Spanish, and we provided Spanish interpretation during the meeting. We posted draft rule language ahead of this workshop, and we got comments in the workshop that were generally supportive of these proposed rule amendments. We gave updates to the Environmental Justice Advisory Group and the Citizens Advisory Committee, and we posted all the final rule documents on February 20th, 2024, ahead of today's meeting. And with that, what we're recommending this morning is that you adopt the proposed amendments to Rule 4905 and authorize the chair to sign the attached resolution. And that's it for the presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Jonathan? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go out to the public. Oh.
Looks like Dr. Sheriff's
okay.
Just got his in right as you were going to the public.
All right, Dr. Sheriffs, you are up first.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was a little slow, and I gather there's a little lag in transmission up to Modesto. Sorry about that. No, I'm struck in terms of this one. You know, as we're always trying to drive better technology as we think about our policies. We're looking for ways that this will help industry move in the directions that we need to move. And if we were the only district now, you know, we have local concerns, as does South Coast, in terms of NOx. We are most challenged there. By the same token, if this is only 1% of the market, you know, this is a tiny market in the valley, and it's going to be very difficult for us alone to be helping manufacturers move in this direction. So it's been especially important in terms of working with South Coast. So I get one of my question is, well, you know, how do we do that collaboration? I think we probably need to do more. There are areas like this that it's much better to have a bigger push than a smaller push. And I'm also wondering, where is the industry going? What are they going to be manufacturing in 2025? Are they going to have a low NOx alternative, or are they looking, in fact, 10, 15 years ahead, and they're not going to do that? It's going to be electric, period.
Through the chair, let me, and John, please feel free to weigh in. So you're right in that us in South Coast on issues like these, and CARB also now with what they're doing with they're doing a statewide evaluation of this very issue, heating and cooling, and in terms of what the future is, zero emissions appliances, zero emissions furnaces, heaters. So a lot of collaboration does need to happen so that we're all looking at this from a couple of different perspectives, technology, but also equity is something that's come up and talking to the board a lot about this in the past, is how do we make sure our low income rural communities are part of the conversation? How do we have an equitable transition to different technologies? So I do think the realities in front of us today are what they are. There are no compliant options. Certainly you could put a heat pump, say, in certain manufactured homes, maybe if there's some electrical capacity, and maybe if there's some sort of an affordability to it, which I think would be questionable in many cases in the Valley. But the reality is that today there's no compliance option. So I think the recommendation, I think, is strong. But there is a larger conversation. There is a collaboration that is indeed going on right now, where we're looking at this with CARB, South Coast, other districts in the context of our ozone plan, now in the context of the new PM plan that we're pulling together. I do, for example, think it's going to be likely that there's more rebates available for heat pumps and other technologies. I see as a preview some recommendations coming the board's way as we think about the new plan that we're pulling together that aren't necessarily tied to replacing residential wood burning. So I think that's something that we're looking at right now, because I do think technology is shifting quite a bit over the next couple of years. I can't predict exactly where it's going to go, because I think manufacturers are looking at this from a lot of different perspectives. There's what's happening in the Valley, what's happening in LA, what's happening in the state, and what's happening in the country, right? These are national manufacturers. So there's a lot of different things that are, I think, playing into that. We're hopeful that there are compliant options by the end of that, 2-year period. But what we also know is that there's probably going to be a lot of movement with other technology, say like electric heat pumps, and there's a lot of push for bringing more of those types of resources, say, into lower income communities. And so I think a lot of that depends on how successful those efforts are as well, to provide that level of access to residents as those policies play out over the next several years. So we'll see, how that looks. But I just wanted to let you know, and we've talked about this before, and it's a great question that you asked. It is going to require looking at this, beyond our region and working with others to see how we can keep, pushing the envelope when it comes to technology.
Thank you. Member Nguyen?
Well, thank you, Mayor. You pretty much answered my question, was what were the manufacturers giving you insight during those meetings? But also I was concerned about the transition for the lower income families from the gas. So sounds like it's a couple of years out now. So thanks for that detail.
Thank you very much. Now, seeing no more member questions, let's go to the public.
Okay, are there any members of the public in Bakersfield that would like to comment on this item?
No comment from Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Modesto to comment on this item?
No public comment in Modesto.
Any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on this item? I'm seeing none in office, but we do have one online, Thomas Menz.
Yes, I took advantage of the district incentive program for a heat pump, and I love it. It saved me money compared to the gas heater that it replaced, which was 35 years old and not as efficient. So the efficiency just really has lowered my monthly cost. I understand that heat pumps for the last 2 years running have outsold gas heaters. And it looks like that trend is going to continue, even in places like Maine, which seems to be a leader. As cold as it is there, they're still quite viable. So it seems like they should be viable any place here, certainly. Rounding back on the issue of emissions from wildfire smoke into the valley. maybe there isn't really an emissions inventory. Maybe no calculation has been done on that. But if somebody wanted to round back on me right now, I know you have my email address, you have my phone number. But if somebody wanted to publicly round back upon that right now and say whether there is or isn't a calculation of the impact of wildfire smoke, I would sure appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
There's no further online comments.
Okay, bring it back to the board for motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion Pereira, Scutia Braden. Call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Couch,
Yes.
Ms. Scutia Brayton,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis,
Yeah.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pereira,
Aye.
Mr. Preciado,
Aye.
Mr. Reyna,
Aye.
Mr. Rickman,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Sheklian,
Aye.
Ms. Nguyen,
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa,
Aye.
to the chair, motion passes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. On to item number 10, receive and file district's annual air toxics report for 2023. Brian and Samir will be presenting.
I'd like to introduce Seth Lane, actually, the manager in technical services who oversees this program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hi, Seth.
Yeah, hey, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Seth Lane, and as Samir said, I'm the program manager in technical services here at the district. So let's begin. The state and federal governments have identified over 1,700 substances that, when suspended in the air, can end up in your body through various pathways and can cause a risk to your health. These substances, at sufficient concentrations and exposure, can potentially impact human health. These impacts can vary, but when dealing with air toxics, we're talking about health impacts such as cancer, long-term chronic health impacts, or short-term acute health impacts. Some of the more commonly known air toxic examples are diesel particulate matter, benzene, hexavalent chromium, and formaldehyde. These toxic pollutants are not the same as the criteria pollutants, those for which EPA has established national ambient air quality standards, like nitrogen oxides and PM2.5. But importantly, even small quantities of air toxics are distributed throughout the air we all breathe, and they get created by a variety of sources from cars and trucks to industrial operations and consumer products. To address toxics in the valley, the district operates a multifaceted and comprehensive program that addresses toxics on various fronts. We refer to this approach as the district's integrated air toxics program. Within the integrated air toxics program, we combine local, state, and federal requirements under one umbrella. The first one to mention is that the district implements the state's air toxics hotspots regulation that addresses health risk from air toxics from existing operations in the valley. We also evaluate new and modified sources of air toxic emissions, making sure we don't allow new health risk situations to be created from new or expanding operations. We implement a large number of regulations designed to reduce risk from air toxics on a facility basis as well. We assist land use agencies by providing our expertise related to addressing and mitigating potential air toxic risks from new development projects under CEQA. And last on the list here, which is a major component of our integrated approach, are the clean air projects funded through the district's grants and incentives programs that have resulted in major emissions reductions, including toxics such as diesel particulate matter. To address air toxics from existing stationary source facilities, the district implements the state's AB 2588 air toxics hotspots regulation. Using the state's program guidelines, facilities submit plans and reports that characterize and quantify their air toxic emissions, which are reviewed by the district. Using that information, the district performs a prioritization. That is a conservative screening health risk assessment. The results of the prioritization puts facilities in one of three categories based on the potential the facility emissions may create a health risk: low, intermediate, or high priority. Low and intermediate priority facilities require no further assessment under the state regulation at that time. Intermediate priority facilities are required to submit updated air toxics information on an ongoing schedule for reevaluation. High priority facilities require further assessment as they may create a health risk. To make that final determination, a more refined health risk assessment is required using complex and super conservative computer modeling of their potential to create a health risk. These health risk assessments take into consideration the concentration of toxics in the air, the potency or toxicity of the chemical, the length of the exposure, how the pollutant is emitted, such as stack height and direction, exit velocity, and even temperature of emissions, wind direction and speed, and distance to the receptor locations. Based on the results of the health risk assessment, a public meeting to inform the neighbors of the potential risk from the facility may be required. And the highest risk facilities would have to make modifications to their operations to reduce the risk they are creating to the point where they are no longer at that level of risk. So this slide provides a summary of our recent work in the program as we continue to assess facilities in our valley. Since 2016, we have completed assessments for more than 7,400 valley facilities through 2023. Of those, more than 5,600 are conditionally exempt under the state regulation from further assessment at this time, and more than 1,600 are intermediate priority facilities requiring periodic update summary evaluations. There were 144 high priority facilities that, through a refined health risk assessment, were determined to be low or intermediate risk facilities. And there are 21 high priority facilities that are currently being evaluated with a refined health risk assessment. All facilities categorized as intermediate priority or intermediate risk have continuing emissions reporting requirements under the program to ensure that a facility is reassessed if necessary. So the previous few slides on hotspots were all about existing sources and emissions. Regarding new equipment and new sources of emissions, we analyzed the potential health risk of every single operation for which we're proposing to issue a permit, if that operation emits any amount of air toxics. And we assist land use agencies to do the same thing under CEQA. For stationary sources, we do this with a risk management review, or RMR. This process is similar to the prioritization, screening, and health risk assessment process I described for hotspots, but for new or modified sources, we utilize worst case potential emissions since the equipment's not yet in operation. We perform this analysis for all proposed increases in toxic emissions, and very health conservative worst case conditions are assumed in our models, such as the maximum potential emissions, stagnant air conditions, and long-term exposure. And if the operation cannot pass the risk assessment with the best available control technology for air toxics, it's not an approvable project as proposed. We also implement a large number of regulations that are aimed at specific types of facilities or operations to further reduce air toxic emissions in the valley. The district is responsible for implementing, through our permitting and inspection processes, local, state, and federal rules and regulations that reduce air toxics. The state regulations are called Air Toxic Control Measures, or ATCMs, and apply to a fairly wide variety of sources, with a few mentioned on this slide. And the federal regulations are generally called MAC standards for maximum achievable control technology. There are approximately 150 MAC standards for various source categories, including aerospace coatings and wood preserving. The district also focuses on incentive grant programs that bring about reductions in NOx and PM, but also achieve collateral reductions in air toxics as a result of the clean air projects. The district has administered more than $6 billion toward clean air projects in the valley, resulting in more than 271,000 tons of emissions reduced. Key components of these emissions reductions are the multitude of grant programs for diesel engines. For example, thanks to replacing or retrofitting trucks, tractors, buses, and ag irrigation engines, there have been over 35,000 diesel engines replaced, resulting in significant amounts of diesel particulate matter reductions in the valley. This is important because diesel exhaust particulate is one of the most potent carcinogenic air toxics, so reductions in diesel particulate matter is critical to reducing the public's health risk. Through these incentive grant programs and other efforts mentioned here today to reduce air toxics in the valley, there has been a major reduction in cancer risk from breathing air in the valley. One indicator of this success is demonstrated in CARB's 2023 California Air Toxics Assessment, or CATA for short, which was just released. CARB's CATA assessment uses a detailed emissions inventory, meteorological data, and an integrated modeling approach for the major air basins in California. The figures on this slide represent the downward cancer risk trend in the valley, where there has been a 55% decrease in cancer risk from air toxics from 2012 to 2017. It is important to note that diesel particulate matter continues to be the primary air toxic contributing to the valley's cancer risk. And the primary contributor of diesel emissions in the valley is from mobile sources under state and federal jurisdiction. As mentioned, DPM from mobile sources is the primary contributor to air toxics cancer risk in the valley, which total more than 85% of the risk. VOCs contributed a smaller portion of the risk, including benzene and formaldehyde, which are emitted primarily from gasoline-driven light-duty passenger vehicles. Heavy metals also contribute a small fraction of the risk, including cadmium, nickel, and lead, which are emitted from miscellaneous mobile sources and certain industrial stationary sources. There is another front related to emissions inventory and air toxics that came about through AB 617 that requires the state to develop a uniform statewide system of annual reporting of criteria and toxic emissions. Emissions inventory data is critical to understanding emission sources and related health risks. As a result, CARB created the Regulation for the Reporting of Criteria Air Pollutants and Toxic Air Contaminants, or CTR, which is a newer regulation requiring statewide enhanced reporting of facility stationary source emissions, including criteria and toxic emissions. CARB's implementation schedule in the regulation is a phased approach. The first phase included the largest facilities based on mass emissions, and subsequent phases are based on facility type or sector type and activity level. The district is and will continue to be implementing the requirements of the new regulation for valley facilities and then sending that compiled inventory data over to CARB. As part of the integrated air toxics approach, the district has an important role in helping businesses understand and comply with the many air toxics rules and requirements. We work with applicants who need assistance in reducing their potential air toxic impacts from new sources of emissions. We continue to assist land use agencies in the valley to address air toxic impacts under CEQA. And we continue to engage the public through community involvement as we implement our integrated air toxics program. For instance, we regularly work with community members to understand the role in the permitting process and to understand the concept of and the conservative nature of risk analysis. We provide bilingual notices of significant permitting actions, and bilingual notifications are required under AB 2588. And also under the umbrella of AB 617, as I mentioned on the slide before, the district is continuing to work with CARB and valley facilities to implement the new enhanced criteria and toxics emission inventory reporting regulation. So with that, we ask that your board receive and file this annual air toxics report to the community and authorize staff to distribute the report. That concludes the presentation, so I'll turn it back over to the chair for discussion.
Thank you very much, Seth. And any questions for staff? And I'm going to hesitate just in case, Dr. Sheriff. Okay, Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Yeah, thank you so much. So in the slide 9, where you have the map from the CATA map, it shows these from the 2017 map. It still has like these little sort of warmer areas around Fresno and Bakersfield. And so if you can walk me through, since we're talking about the the cancer risk by category being particularly on diesel PM, what, and then the other piece, the VOCs and the heavy metals, why are we seeing these as the warmer areas in this data?
Those are actually areas alongside major roadways. And so that's one of the reasons why those areas are warmer. There's some of the major highways and freeways along that area.
So in terms of those, I mean, I hear you, and I don't see like the entire 5 corridor or the entire 99 kind of highlighted. So, just trying to understand, I mean, is it because of like, is there like depots or is it about activity? What?
Yeah, my guess would be that it's, you know, a confluence of that activity, right? I mean, you've got the corridor obviously up and down the valley, and you do kind of see, you know, a little bit lesser primarily along that corridor, you know, but I do think that when you look at the fact like in Bakersfield, you've got massive, you know, interchanges going on with, you know, east-west, north-south, the 599, and I think that there's going to be probably higher concentrations of that sort of activity in those areas. And so I think, I mean, it's a carb tool, so we're happy to try to unpack that some more and kind of get back to you and you know, answer that question. But my guess would be that there is,
really
I think there is a concentration of activity though, generally in those areas that we've seen in other studies as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, I would appreciate the follow-up just to see if there are any additional opportunities that that we may want to think about when it comes to the cancer risk. And obviously the overall picture is a great improvement. And I think that, you know, when you look at data points, the trends are important. So I want to definitely highlight that piece as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other board members, we can go out to the public.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on this? Seeing none in Fresno, are there any members of the public in Bakersfield that would like to comment on this?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Modesto that would like to comment on this?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. We do have one online comment, Thomas Menz.
Yes, I know that wood smoke is also toxic and is full of toxic compounds. I believe it's especially pernicious, in fact, highly inflammatory, many times more carcinogenic than cigarette smoke, for instance, according to the district's past reports to the community on the wood burning seasons. And I have read over the past few years with all of the wildfires that many scientists are saying that wildfire smoke is actually worse than diesel pound for pound or microgram per microgram. And I'm just curious, you know, now about the impact of how many tons per day, on average, of wildfire smoke is affecting the valley. And I'm assuming we don't have such a calculation. But if somebody wanted to chime in right now, I would sure appreciate it. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Please.
Yeah, just quick response and some clarification also on the earlier question from Dr. Pacheco-Werner. So the CATA tool, I wanted to get some confirmation on this, and so I've gotten some. The CATA tool is population weighted also, so that probably helps answer part of the why you see even brighter concentrations, kind of based on where populations are too, along with exposure, right? So it's not just about emissions, but it's also you know, who's experiencing those emissions. That might help partly explain it, but certainly still a great question. We'll follow through on that. And as far as wood burning goes, wildfire, residential wood smoke, the CATA tool is just one example of this, kind of related to Mr. Menz's question, that does take into account wildfire emissions and other sources of emissions in its analysis. So I just want to clarify that as well. Residential wood smoke as a whole isn't treated like diesel particulate matter. So whether it's residential wood smoke or wildfire, any sort of wood burning emissions, there are ways that you can look at individual emissions or the individual components of those emissions and then do a health risk analysis kind of based on that. But as a whole, unlike diesel particulate matter, it's not assigned it's not designated as an air toxic pollutant or contaminant. And so, but there is significant health risk, as we all know, that comes from residential wood smoke. There are components that, you know, that are treated as identified air toxic contaminants and have a quantifiable, you know, value to them. as I mentioned, the CATA tool, for example, does take those things into account. Just want to provide a little bit of clarification on that. And the more data that keeps coming out on residential wood smoke and other types of wood burning, clearly there's a major health risk associated with those types of emissions.
Thank you very much for that clarification. All right.
There's no
Seeing
further
more-
online comments.
Thank you much. All right, I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Can I ask a question? Can I
You
ask
can.
a question before we
Absolutely,
take
Dr.
action?
Sheriff.
Thank you. Looking at the report, table 1, the primary hazardous air pollutant emissions, where's the acetaldehyde coming from? And and I'd also point out, I think, in the table, it's number 1. That doesn't make it the most dangerous, but that may mislead people.
So that's a chemical used in the production of perfumes, resins, and dyes, fruit and fish preservatives. It's a flavoring agent, solvent, component of tobacco smoke. And in the CATA, it was one of the larger parts of that VOC chunk in the CATA risk.
It's a chemical with a complicated history. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now I'm going to bring it back to the board. We need a motion.
Motion to approve.
File.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Second.
Call the roll.
Hey, Mr. Couch,
Yes.
Ms. Escutia-Brayton, aye. Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. McCauley,
Yes.
Mr. Mendez,
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco-Warner,
Yes.
Mr. Pereira,
Aye.
Mr. Preciado,
Yes.
Mr. Reyna,
Yes.
Mr. Rickman,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff,
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian,
Aye.
Ms. Nguyen,
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa.
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Seth, thank you. On to a verbal report from the California Air Resources Board activities. Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Hi, everyone. So the CARB is working a lot on many different fronts. I think in terms of upcoming rulemaking, as you see in our full agenda, we have the low carbon fuel standard and the zero emission forklift regulation. On the LCF, both fronts, I think, really want to thank local folks for being involved in that process, because I do think that it's important to hear. And I'm, even talking with staff earlier this week about the zero emission forklift, how much in terms of like flexibilities and thought that they've put into, infrastructure challenges and all of that, building that flexibility in, I think has come from, the invitations by our folks to actually come here and see the challenges firsthand. And to the earlier comments, I am meeting with staff tomorrow on the ACT omnibus regulations. So definitely following up on all of the engagement I have on the challenges of omnibus. So thank you for that continued engagement. And I think I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On to Executive Director report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things to report on, starting with the great trip last week to Sacramento that I participated in as a member of the Regional Policy Council, but also had great participation from 3 of our board members here, you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Escutia-Brayton, and Mayor Alvaro Preciado. All 3 of you were part of that. Just wanted to thank you for continuing to fight for the Valley. The farmer program funding was one of the major priorities that we were meeting with legislators and key staffers last week in Sacramento about, and trying to, in a very tough budget season, as I know you've all heard, see if we can continue that program forward. And so just wanted to thank the board members again for being able to join that and supporting that ongoing effort. I also want to just mention that there is a lot of outreach happening in April and May here in the next couple of months due to Air Quality Awareness Week, Earth Day, Bike to Work Week, and other various activities that are going on. We'll be out and about all throughout the Valley supporting different events. You heard about Fresno's Earth Day, but there's many other events out there. If you have any ideas or want us to be a part of anything that you're all involved in, please let me know, and we're more than happy to support that. And yeah, keep an eye out for us, and we'll have staff everywhere here the next couple of months. And just want to mention a couple more things. You heard the news, I'm sure, yesterday regarding the new national regulations on passenger vehicles. Quite a big announcement on a national level. In California, we already have measures in place, so it's not going to impact California here, but it, on a larger scale, certainly, major news there. And then lastly, save the date, which I'll be getting to you by email. There's an event, the first inaugural Community Clean Air Day event that we're hosting here in downtown Fresno on June 22nd. It'll involve a variety of community stakeholders getting together with leaders to talk about the various community engagement work that's going on with respect to air quality, and just championing some of the success and just talking about future opportunities as well. So wanted to make sure you heard that date, and I'll get you more information on that. So with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Samir?
What did you say that date was?
June 22nd.
And where's it going to be at?
Downtown Fresno.
Well, we're at downtown Fresno.
Convention Center. Yes, thank you. I was just looking. I was buying time. Sorry.
What time, Samir?
Sorry, the microphone was off there, but back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So, no, could you repeat what time?
Yeah, it's going to be an all-day event, 9 to 3, downtown Fresno at the Convention Center.
Okay. Will do. No more questions? All right, board member comments. Supervisor, Member Mendez.
This is actually a good comment. I want to thank the guys that put this meeting on, technical guys behind the scene, because even today, with you chairing the meeting in Modesto, I didn't even really feel a time lag. And I think the thing is that we've kind of invented the concept of doing this type meeting. It's been done for many years. I mean, I have never, ever, in the 10 years that I've been here, even had mic feedback. And I know people are really good about keeping their mics off, but sometimes we get where there's a half a dozen mics on and no feedback. So I just want to thank you guys. And gals who are putting this meeting on. Great job.
Thank you very much for bringing that up, because for sure there was no lag time. I can tell by our movements. We can see it in the background behind you. So we've done a great job of catching up with technology. You guys are awesome. Member Escutia Braden.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add just a little bit to what Samir reported on earlier in terms of our participation in the San Joaquin Valley Voice Trip to Sacramento. In addition to the legislative advocacy that Samir referenced, we had an opportunity to go to an event that it was a who's who among air quality leaders. It really was a who's who. But what was so amazing about our attendance there is that the good work by Samir, the district, and this board was acknowledged and recognized, and accolades were given So I just wanted to say congratulations to not only Samir, but his entire staff and team, and to the board, because the work we are doing is going noticed. And so keep up the good work.
Sorry that I skipped you, Member McCauley.
I forgive you, Chair. No worries.
There's a lag in the technology.
It's a lag in the technology, that's right. I just wanted to thank Samir and the team for coming up the hill, joining me in North Fork to meet with a team at North Fork Community Power, talk with them on the new biomass plant that'll be going online very shortly. Happy to report they are connected with PG&E, so they are now energized and running through tests, which will mean they will be going online sometime middle of this year, which will be great.
Thank you. Dr. Pacheco-Warner?
Yes, I can't wait to see the district at the Earth Day, and I'm sure my son will be excited about whatever flag you bring. I also wanted to note that on the firework piece, there's cumulative effects that are important to consider, and why this piece is so important. And I can tell you, as a asthmatic, there's no time when I reliably put out my my breathing treatment that I have at home than the 4th of July, when I know I will need it for sure. And so there is, there are real effects of why this is important, and I'm happy to be seeing it go through. And I do want to mention that my personal air filter, which is a bigger unit than the one you guys are giving out, is about $40 with taxes, the replacement filter. So it is nowhere near $100. So I think that that's an accurate representation of what these replacement filters cost. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Rickman?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just want you all to know that, it's great to have the chairman here. And, he mentioned to us here that Modesto was by far the best office. So just let everybody know. And, we haven't had lunch here in about, a year, Lloyd? So it's also nice to have the chair here. We can actually eat once. So appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Dr. Sheriff?
Yeah, no, go. And the fireworks came up again, so I just want to say, much as I enjoy the fireworks and Fowler on the 4th of July and recognize what a wonderful community event that is, I am hereby taking a pledge to not attend an event with fireworks on the 4th of July. But I'll be looking for a drone show.
Okay.
Excellent. Vice Chair Lewis?
Love Visalia.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a comment back on Board Member Rickman. Enjoy your lunch over in Modesto.
Thank you. Member Robinson?
I just wanted to tell staff what a good job. I mean, when you look back at the CATA data, 55% reductions in cancer risk, that's amazing. Good job, staff.
Very good news today. Glad to hear it. All right. I see no more comments. We do have a closed session, and I will turn it over to Annette.
Yes, sir. We have a closed session item, conference with labor negotiators, item 14A on the agenda. And do we have any public members that wish to comment on that item?
Are there any public comments in Bakersfield on the closed session item?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public in Modesto that would like to comment on this item?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. In Fresno, do we have any members of the public who would like to comment? Seeing none in Fresno and no online comments.
Thank
We
you.
will
Then we
convene to
will
closed session.
adjourn to closed session. And we're not expecting a report out, right, Annette?
That is correct. No reportable action